Hello, Canada. Welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. So, with this entire propaganda media, it kind of hit me here yesterday that I should do a show exposing the new Liberal Party and their policies and how they are intertwined with the fascist ideology. They've gone beyond socialism. Their ideas are, first of all, to push through this socialist ideology, followed by what especially Carney and these multi-billionaires want in the end, which is total control, which theoretically is fascism. Now, I've said it on many previous episodes how the door handle's been turned and we are slowly opening the door to fascism. But I figured there's no better way in order for me to give you a comparison than through an amazing woman named Kitty Werthmann. Now, Kitty Werthmann is a survivor from the Holocaust. I ran across her decades ago, way before the internet. And of course, back then it was through transcripts that I could find. And luckily, I had a couple really good teachers that saw my love of history and how I was fascinated by it, especially with what's happened, like I said before, to parts of my ancestry. And they helped to kind of guide me and help me follow, find, because it was really hard back then in order to get information. It was all done through paper, and a lot of the stuff was really hard to find. Like, I don't remember going through all the machines, right? And you'd get the little file cards, you put them in, and you'd blow them up on a computer, and you'd have to go through each single individual newspaper. And if the library you were at wasn't, big enough, you wouldn't even find it there. So fortunate at the time, I was living in a city. But I ran across a lot of her speeches in paper and text form, and I became fascinated because it was a living host giving firsthand stories of what to look out for to stop this from ever happening again. Now, Kitty has passed away a couple years ago. God rest her soul. She was a great spokesperson warning the world, and she was invited everywhere, and a great public speaker, especially since she did live through what was known as the Holocaust. So I'm just gonna use one of her speeches, just one, that's all I need, and give you a comparison of what the Liberal Party of today is doing to Canada and how blind Canada is to what's happening. Now, we saw this back with Trudeau's father, because he was the exact same. He tried to do the socialist push as well, which out east, there's still a lot of people who think he's some great leader. He was far from that. And he was the first major blow to freedom in Canada. And that came through with his, of course, 1980-some constitutional reform, his whole new constitutional act, which just decimated our country, and we've been suffering ever since. As well as his so-called Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And for those you don't know, his version of it was scandalously disgusting. And if it wasn't for a lot of premiers fighting on it, we would be living in a socialist world today. But even then, there was kind of met halfway, and it gave the government way too much power over our rights, which we saw during the Freedom Convoy and the use of the Emergencies Act, which is kind of funny, right? That only two people in Canadian history to ever use it. First, the War Measures Act, which then turned into a completely new name, was Pierre Trudeau and his son Justin. Right there are two great hints on the ideology of this family and now the entire Liberal Party. And Carney is the master puppet. He's the puppet master of this ideology. And he's using a whole new climate scam in order to push through fascism. Now, don't take my word for it. Let's take it right from somebody who's lived through it and heed her warnings. And through this, I'm just going to show you the Liberal Party's actions. And you be the judge of it. And I urge you, I post everything in the links below, to watch her entire speech. It will shake you to the core on how Canada is 3/4 the way there. Without further ado, let's listen to Kitty.
So we could listen to him. He was a great orator. And then he nationalized the radio station. And we were warned, if we would turn on a foreign radio station like British Broadcasting or Switzerland, death penalty. Nobody turned on a foreign radio station because you know what the death penalty meant. So the newspaper, before it hit the street, it was being censored by the government. So the only voice what we had was the government radio station and the government-controlled newspaper. So a lot of new things happened very quick. Hitler gave us equal rights.
Now, with us, they're using a completely different tactic. Because of the world we live in, they have digital control. So what they do is they just, considering CRTC controls whatever you can watch, they just ban news outlets to stop you from seeing what's going on around the world. They use the media platforms in order to remove any media that goes against their ideology. Now, anybody who does any type of research knows this. I know this. I literally got a VPN locator so I can get the hell out of this country digitally and see real news. That's something most Canadians, first of all, don't even know about. And the few that do, it costs us money to get these programs. So instead of going out and getting rid of you for doing it, they just control the market. And they do so through manipulation. What our government has done is they have bought media. So not only do they have the CRTC, which controls who can and cannot broadcast news. We don't have that. CRT's controlled us for decades. It was one of the craziest and nastiest things ever put in. Federal government's latest media bailout, another bad idea. The governmentalization of the news media in Canada continues apace. According to a recent announcement by the Trudeau government, the CRTC determined that a new temporary fund for commercial radio stations in smaller markets should be created. Now, radio stations outside Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Ottawa-Gatineau will be eligible for taxpayer subsidies. Clearly a bad idea. Firstly, there's no obvious market failure for the government will solve. If the value of local radio stations is measured by how much revenue they generate, is higher than the cost of running those stations, no subsidies are needed to keep them going. Conversely, if the costs are higher than the benefits, it doesn't make any sense to keep these radio stations on the air. The government said the new funding is temporary, but as economist Milton and Rose Friedman famously observed, nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program. Taxpayers can reasonably expect that the subsidies to local news stations will become an ongoing expense instead of a one-time hit to their wallets, which this is still going on. Then they also created bills. And in these bills, they were forcing media, they were forcing the new social giants to pay only certain media outlets dividends from their platforms. That's right. So independent media, if they aren't on the liberal team spewing their propaganda, they don't get on the list, which none of us want to be on that list anyways. We don't want government subsidies. We shouldn't have to. This is why I always tell you, like, share, and subscribe. And some of these outlets fought back. Meta was one of them. They were like, not happening. So what did they do? They shut off all media. They were forced to because of this legislation. This is complete government control of the media. The bill was even written as such, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. Everything you hear and see on your satellite through Canadian telecommunications controlled by the CRTC and the radio controlled by the CRTC is all propaganda. It has to be, or they lose their license. And the government uses excuses like, oh, well, we don't want people knowing that because we don't want civil unrest. Well, why wouldn't you want civil unrest? Maybe because you're a government of tyranny? And that's why you hear about 10 people who are standing on a corner that are, you know, some Antifa Black Lives Matter, but you won't hear about the truth of, say, the Freedom Convoy. And then they attack certain places, especially if these protests get so big, then they go on the attack. And they use people like McGregor and these other useless, absolutely, completely biased socialist reporters to try and make them look evil. And then they get all happy, take their check and go home. Everything you hear is controlled. They own the media. Now, previous episodes, I expose this all the time. I'm not going to waste my time on that now. Like I said, I urge you, tune into previous episodes. And as the future goes, I'm just going to keep exposing them for what they were. Today on the newsreel, oh my God, it was horrible. I had it playing in the background. They went on, and right away they bring out Trump. Because the narrative's falling. Carney, he's losing votes. So they literally sent a useless reporter down there. I'm not even going to say her name. She's a waste of skin. She went down there, and she's poking the bear and throwing the questions in order for them to reignite this Trump thing, where he's actually said already, I don't want to get involved in your guys' election, because he knows they're using him in order to keep this fascist government in power. And then right after, instead of giving any information about what the Liberal Party is, they never talk. I don't know if any of you have noticed this. They never talk about any of the Liberal Party that are still have their seats, that are running in this election, and how they've completely destroyed our nation. It's all about Carney. It's all about Carney. And then they'll use a quick clip about Poilievre, how he avoided the question and he didn't do this, and then that's the end of it. And that's how they leave you. Not saying that the reason they're manipulating that is because Poilievre's come straight out and said, I'm defunding them. I am going to remove government funding to media. That is a step in the like a step back to where we were, to a democracy, and get rid of the propaganda. That is in every part of our lives. Every single part of your life, the CRTC and the government, they own it all. And that's all you're going to hear. They've tried this for how many years with Trudeau? hiding scandal after scandal, trying to convince you that, oh no, this new council they put together, they're going to look at justice and that was proven wrong. But they don't tell you that. And how I showed you on the previous episode, how they do issue an apology, but they don't actually say anything on the air. They bury it on an internet web page somewhere in the very back recesses that nobody will ever find or see. This is how socialism takes a foot. Now, we're going to move on a little deeper. I just got to get these clips right here in order for... She does this very fast, and I'm trying to make sure that we can kind of keep this all going. Okay, here we go.
Oh, that sounded so very good. Equal rights for everybody. Also, everybody was getting a guaranteed income from the government. The equal rights, here we call it the Equal Rights Amendment. Equal rights was designed in two components: equality, economics, and social. Economics, that was designed to...
Now here you go. National Framework for a Guaranteed Livable Basic Income. The first bill was tossed out. And then they brought the second bill in, Bill S-233. Again, on hold with this election, they're going to bring this in. Enactment requires the Minister of Finance to develop a national framework to provide all persons over the age of 17 in Canada with access to a guaranteed livable basic income. It also provides reporting requirements for the respect of the framework. This is completely socialist, people. Completely socialist. Let her talk a little bit more.
So, a lot of new things happened very quick. Hitler gave us equal rights. Oh, that sounded so very good. Equal rights for everybody. Also, everybody was getting a guaranteed income from the government. The equal rights, here we call it the Equal Rights Amendment. Equal rights was designed in two components: equality, economics, and social. Economics, that was designed to equalize the country's wealth, because everybody was entitled to a guaranteed equal income. In order to achieve that, they had to raise our taxes up to 70% to equalize the wealth. Those who were on the lower income level, to graduate them up there to an equal level. They got subsidized housing, they got food stamps, they got heating fuel, and they got a certain amount of payment from the government for each child. So they equalized the country's wealth by taxing us 70% to bring that level, the lower income level, into an equal level, and that is called socialism.
Yes. She's absolutely correct. Everything she says is correct. Where did the middle class go? Why is our debt so high? Canada's middle class has seen their share of wealth shrink to a new low. The income gap between the bottom 40% and the top 40% of households reached 47% in Q2 2024. That's a 0.2 points higher than the previous record, making it a new record for the inequality indicator, according to StatCan. They also note they began collecting data 25 years ago, back in 1999. At least one whole generation has never experienced such inequality in Canada. I'm just going to kind of put this in layman's terms. Not only is the middle class taxed unfairly, the entire society has been taxed unfairly because of debt. The government has to get their money from somewhere. And they're not looking on the offshore bank accounts of Carney and his businesses. No. Those are the good guys. Those are the ones who don't get taxed. And every time you hear them say, oh, we're going after the 1%, the ultra rich, that's a lie. How long have they been saying this? They've been in power for how long? Instead, they don't do a thing. This goes against the socialist agenda because those people are making billions of dollars off of your back. Now, argue with what you want. You got the man south of the border doing the exact opposite. He is starting to remove the taxes off of middle class all the way down. This creates true wealth to create and bolster everybody up into a middle class. Canada's been doing the opposite for generations. Every time they go into debt, they spend more money and go into more debt. That burden is passed on to you, your kids, and their kids. We saw this with Trudeau Sr. This is socialism. They give you the oh no, we're just trying to bring everybody to the middle class. And that's how they word it. That's how the media puts it out there. But if they were really doing that, then they would be removing taxes, not creating more taxes. I'll put it to you this way. Here's a great example of how you separate the rich from the poor. And I'm just going to use just the most basic recreational thing that we have. Alcohol. If you're rich, you can afford to have a bottle of liquor in your cabinet because the escalating tax doesn't hurt you. But if you're middle class or down, it does. That's how they work it. And oh, but it's liquor. It's liquor. It's bad. Well, then why is it proportionately harder for anybody making less than, let's say, $250 a year to buy it? Because we're taxed so much. And then to go in there and know that the bottle should only cost $16, but instead it's $63 with the taxes on it. Now, to a rich person, they don't give a shit. Carbon scheme is the exact same thing. It's not affecting the rich. They don't care. But what it's doing is it's creating a huge pay difference, a huge gap in wealth, separating the rich from the poor. Now the middle class is now the poor. Middle class is being stifled. They're doing this on purpose. This is socialism.
On the social level, of course, under socialism, everybody has to be in the workforce. Before Hitler, of course, the moms stayed home, they were good wives, and they raised their families. But under socialism, if you are not in the workforce, you are called a parasite. So the moms were being put out into the workforce. So what happened to the children? Child care centers.
Now, this goes back to a lot of studies that were done. And this isn't nothing to do with the women's rights movement. If women can work, why wouldn't you? But when when both people within that relationship are forced to work in order to feed and house themselves and try to create some type of a future for their children, this is socialism. We should have never got to the point where you need both parents out working a minimum of 8 hours, a minimum. Today, it's a minimum of 8 hours a day. And even then, they're having an incredibly hard time making ends meet. So instead of creating a tax system where a parent has the choice now, the ability to stay home and raise their children under their idea of a nuclear family. No. That's not what socialism wants. Socialism wants to raise your children for you. This is an ongoing. If they were serious about families, if they were serious about wanting to bolster healthy families, they would give that incentive to parents. Either or parent could stay home, or one could take reduced hours to be able to raise their kids. That's not what they do. That's not in the government. That's not in the socialist government's agenda. Now, who feels this burden? The ultra rich? No, they don't feel this burden. They can hire a private nanny of their choosing that gives that moral base that the parents find by picking out the right one, that's who I would like to help raise my children. You don't have that choice. Now, I'm not saying daycares are bad. They're not. Daycares are great. There's a lot of them that are absolutely fabulous. But how do you manipulate the system in order to put major pressure and force even more debt onto parents? You create a daycare program like this farce. $10 a day daycare. Now, who's carrying the burden of this? The government doesn't have the money to roll this out and pay the employees an actual living wage. You can't do it. It's an impossibility. But the media helps them push this ideal. This is a good thing. This way parents can go out and work. Why do they have to work so hard? Oh, right, because the taxes are so high. And why are the taxes high? Well, because we have programs like $10 a day daycare, which increases the amount of taxes that we're going to have to pay, which creates more of a burden on the family, which now they have to work even larger and longer days in order to pay more money into the bankrupt system to pay for something that literally can't work. And all of these daycares are now forced to stop taking more kids because they can't afford to pay their employees. So say goodbye to the high wages. Say goodbye to a fair wage. They can't afford to pay the wage. So then it forces provinces to have to go, well, shit, man, now we're stuck. Now I've got to help pay for that. And certain programs that the government had already been trying to roll out, all of a sudden they need to make cuts on them because the money isn't there, because they're losing daycares. Daycares are dropping off the map because they can't afford what the government's paying them, but they have to give that $10 a day daycare. Now you've got hundreds of thousands of parents that can't find daycare. The rich get ahead more people in the middle class fall behind. This is socialism. I'm going to skip ahead a little wee bit. I urge you to watch this entire, Kitty is amazing. I urge you to watch her entire speech. And like I said, this is just one of them. She's actually got a lot that are way longer and better, where she takes a lot of questions. They're fabulous. When you actually see the reactions of people, it gives you goosebumps, because they realize they're voting for socialist ideas, but have been convinced that these are good things. They're not good things. Anyways, moving a little bit further.
Also, of course, under a socialist government, you have a lot of rules and regulation. We had a planning agency that was designed to control the businesses and the farmers. The bureaucrats, we had tons of bureaucrats. That's how Hitler created jobs, government jobs. Lot of bureaucrats.
Lots and lots of bureaucrats. And it also helps the government to lie on the actual jobs. When you can't find work and you fall off of unemployment, you're not a stat. Our unemployment rate is well above 20% in Canada. And if you add on the migrants that have come in that can't find work but aren't necessarily part of the system yet because they're not actually a stat, they're as well not calculated into this. Then you got to add into account all of the students. When there's no work for the people and there's no work for the students, they're not on the list. Now you're at like 25% unemployment. So what do you do in order to bullshit the numbers? You hire government bureaucrats. And not only does this falsify the numbers, it also gives them more bureaucracy to put through more rules and more regulations that give more taxes and put more of a burden on who? The rich? No. It's the middle class that suffers. Trudeau government increased federal employees 40% since election in 2015. Ottawa, another 21,000 federal workers hired since last year, has brought the total added to the federal public service since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was first elected to 98,268, according to the information published online at the Treasury Board of Canada. The federal public service is now at, listen to this, 357,247 employees, is nearly 40% larger than it was in 2015 when the Liberals took power, when it accounted for 257,000. That's 100,000 less employees. Now are you understanding why Poilievre is bringing this to attention? He's bringing this up because this bureaucracy has become a huge burden. He likes to call it the red tape. And it is. But this is how socialism works. It allows the ultra elite to get further ahead, take control over mom and pop companies that can't afford to make business anymore. The tax burden is too high. Bring on more A&Ws and KFCs. Forget about the local hardware. We're going to bring in another Walmart. This has been slowly destroying our country. The States has seen it. Europe has seen it. The tax burden is so huge on the people that they don't have the ability to create a competitive market. And this last government, the Trudeaus, have made it almost impossible for small business to be competitive in any way. And now you add in the ultra-religious idea, the new socialist oppressive religion of green, the carbon system. It's a lie. This is a tool that is used to force socialism on societies. It takes control and forces companies to abide by this new religion, or you will suffer the consequences. This is how they work. This is what they do. Now, I'm going to show you a document which I've shown on previous episodes. This is the Judiciary Committee. Sustainability Shakedown, how a climate cartel of money managers colluded to take over the board of America's largest energy company. The U.S. antitrust law competition is always favored over collusion. The largest money managers, however powerful they may be, cannot collude to preempt the working of a market by deciding for themselves that customers do not need that which they demand. Carney loves this. He's going to make sure he pushes this carbon tax in the highest degree and try to hide it from Canadians, because obviously the visible one didn't work. Remember, everybody, he's taking credit. Well, no, I removed the carbon tax. No, you didn't. You were forced to, because conservatives brought the awareness of the lie that 8 out of 10 made more. That's bullshit. That's socialism. That's taking from the middle class to give to the poor, to decimate the middle class in order to alleviate the poor, but still create higher taxes on everybody except the uber rich. Socialism. This is especially true when the conspiracy shrinks the production of the affordable energy products relied upon by millions of Americans. The Committee of the Judiciary is entrusted with the protection of trade and commerce against unlawful restraints of monopolies, including anti-competitive agreements that restrict products available to American consumers. Scroll down a little wee bit. Target disfavored companies. Here's an example. The climate cartel branded ExxonMobil as a focus company on its climate blacklist, grading it against a net zero benchmark and signaling investors to organize a barrage of shareholder pressure campaigns more than any other company in the world. Forced disclosures through name and shame engagements, the climate cartel demanded that ExxonMobil make immaterial climate disclosures that obscure material information by distorting the markets with speculative climate-related guesswork. The climate cartel launched a Trojan horse campaign calling for emission reduction targets that require steep declines in ExxonMobil's production and use of affordable carbon-based energy, and enforced demands. When ExxonMobil refused to surrender to its net zero demands, the climate cartel colluded to vote no against its board of directors to show that engagement can have teeth and that investors are willing to escalate pressure against companies that refuse to act. I urge you to read this document. Again, I attach everything to the description below. By the way, Carney is on this. The whole GVANS that he created. It is a cartel. The entire green agenda is a cartel. I witnessed this when they tried it with the Kyoto. I was working in the industry. I saw it firsthand. Got to sit on a board because we were testing emissions coming out of stacks. And when a few of them started to expose to me what was going on, of course being a history buff and not watching sitcoms, I did research and realized this was a China attempt to crush our markets, to take it over through supposed other new companies and investors, which gave China a huge advantage that they wanted to crush the American greenback. Sound familiar, people? This is Kyoto 2.0. This is socialism. We're going to move on a little bit further into Kitty, the amazing, amazing woman.
We also had euthanasia, killing people. In my last year of college, I was sent to a small village to do my practice teaching. Maybe I should back up and tell you what really happened in education. When the time came to pick your major in college, I wanted to be a journalist and writer. I was told they didn't need journalists, they did not need writers either. They needed young teachers. So I had to go into education. I did not mind that because I like children.
Now, euthanasia. She gets pretty graphic here. Again, I urge you to watch it in its entirety. But it's the same thing our government is doing here today. Our government, now, personally, I'm all for freedom. And I do believe that if a person is suffering, we should have the freedom. The government shouldn't tell us what we can do in any aspect. So I do agree that we should have the right to allow ourselves to indignity. But the problem is the way they do it. They do it in a socialist idea. More than half of the people who have taken the MAID program have done so because they can't get the help they need through our medical system, our socialist Medicare care. Add that to a long list of different surgeries that the government deems unworthy yet here, that they don't even offer. And now add that to all of these different drugs from around the world that other countries are using that we don't use. I have seen this firsthand. And what a lot of people aren't talking about, which I'm probably going to do an episode later on, is how they actually push MAID and what happens to the human body when you do go through the process. And I'm going to tell you, it may look painless. I've witnessed this. But it's not. The people that are doing this, yes, there is a small percentage of them that there is no turning back. There is no cure. They are suffering. That's fine. But when you start using government programs, like for our military, and the doctors are promoting you to take MAID as opposed to maybe telling the government you should put that wheelchair ramp in to a military lady because she can't get funding from the government. They've abandoned our military. That's one of the first things they want to jump up and say. And if you can't go and you can't get the operation, because first of all, there's a long list, or they don't offer it, like say a back injury. Oh no, we'll weld you, but they won't do a frontal. No, you got to go to the States for that. Every other country does it. Not here. There was a program in Alberta that offered it, but now you've got all these flippant lefties who are arguing against Daniel Smith about allowing these private care facilities to come in. They would rather see you suffer the rest of your life and never be able to function with a good back. You wait in line, and if you don't get it, well, then you're going to have to raise money. And the government always says, oh, no. We'll pay for it. If it's not here, you go across, we'll pay for it. So what, you got to sell your house in order to go down and pay for it to come back to maybe get money? And guess what? It's like 3% of the people that actually leave the country that the government agrees to pay for their surgery. And even then, there's only certain things they'll pay for. So you're still stuck with a huge bill. This is socialism. Do you think the rich give a shit? They don't care. They'll fly to Sweden, get the surgery and drop 200 grand. It don't affect them. Especially when they're making record profits and the middle class is disappearing. This is socialism. Disturbing experts troubled by Canada's euthanasia laws. Toronto, Alan Nicholas had a history of depression and other medical issues, but none were life-threatening. When the 61-year-old Canadian was hospitalized in June 2019 over fears he might be suicidal, he asked his brother to bust him out as soon as possible. Within a month, Nichols submitted a request to be euthanized and was killed, despite concerns raised by his family and a nurse practitioner. His application for euthanasia listed only one health condition for the reason to request to die: hearing loss. This is only one example. I think, I can't keep track of the numbers of how many people have done this program. It's out of control. It's to the point where other countries around the world are talking about what's going on in Canada. And our media, crickets. Who owns the media? Right. Socialism. I'm going to move a little bit further ahead in Kitty's conversation.
We also had gun control. The government said that children were playing with guns, and we had hunting accidents, people accidentally shooting each other, and we had criminals again, murderers. The only way that they could track the murderer was by the serial number of the gun. So bring your gun to the police station, then we can register the serial number and we can track the criminal. And we thought that was a good idea. Mm-hmm. So gladly we did that. Not long afterwards, they said no, it did not help. We could not track all the criminals. The best way to have no more crimes and no more people getting hurt, bring your guns to the police station, and they already know who had guns because we registered our guns. Keep your guns and buy more guns and stack up on your ammo. A gun is no good if you don't have any ammo. Dictatorship did not happen overnight.
Now,
reaction to the federal government's recent expansion to its ban on firearms has been mixed. Gun control groups say it doesn't go far enough, while firearm rights groups say it's an overreach and targets lawful gun owners, including hunters. The Liberals say the goal of the ban is to end gun violence. Now, law enforcement is, of course, on the front lines of that fight. And joining us now is Global's crime commentator, Hank Idzinga. Hank, thanks so much for speaking with us today.
Hey, good morning, Miranda. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so you have decades of experience in law enforcement. You were with the Toronto Police Service for 34 years. From what you've seen in your experience serving, where do the majority of weapons that are involved in gun crimes here in Canada tend to come from?
Yeah, the vast majority of weapons, and it's always been true, have come across the border from the United States
Hear what he said? And it's always been true.
through the different border crossings.
And Hank, how many would you say are traced back to lawful gun owners here in Canada? Obviously, you don't have to give a specific amount, but is there a percentage? Is it high? Is it low? What are we talking here?
I believe lately the numbers, over 90% of the recovered crime firearms are from the United States, and less than 10% are stolen here in Canada or come from lawful gun owners here in Canada.
Did you hear what he said? The other 10%, the reason the government is skewing numbers, all of that, they twist it. And they use their propaganda tool to say, oh, but there's still X amount. Those are legal firearms. They were stolen from legal firearm owners. And this number is only this high now because crime in break and enters has skyrocketed. 10 years ago, it was 2% because crime was at a low when we had serious laws putting criminals behind bars, especially if you were caught with a stolen firearm. Now, they're out in 24 hours, and they're running the streets, and they know where to go if they want to get guns. A lot of the times, you go and you hit the rural farmers, because they're the guys and girls that usually are hunters, sustenance hunters, and need it for predator control on their properties. This is socialism. Crime is at an all-time high. Violent crime up 43%. It's just exploding. Gun crime is completely off the charts. This is why the police associations and now the Toronto police came out yesterday and said they are backing Pierre Poilievre. On previous episodes, I've showed clips where the Toronto Police Service actually tweeted back to Trudeau, who was bragging about his supposed handgun ban, where they said, we don't know what you think you're doing, but you're not doing anything to help. In fact, you're doing the opposite. Crime is skyrocketing. Good cops know. Leave the guns to legal gun owners. We have to go through an incredibly hard process. Full criminal checks, rotating. They check on you all the time once you're in the database. If your name comes up and you are suspected of a violent crime or any crime in general, they have the right to come and will come and take your firearms away and revoke your license. If you're guilty, gone, you'll never get it back again. If you're innocent, the red tape you have to go through in order to get your license again and then get your firearms, which I've heard of how so many cases where, oh, sorry, they've all been destroyed. And you don't get payment for it. Sorry. Socialism. This is how it works. This is what they do. These are only a few comparisons, just a few comparisons on socialism. If you watch this entire speech from Kitty, you will get shivers down your back. Not only with some of the things that we've already had for generations, thanks to the first socialist, but in the last 10 years, what this government has done and is doing, and Carney is going to be the finishing touches. This is why I made an entire episode on the dystopian paper that came out that was released, warning Canada, if we stay on this track, what's going to happen to us as a nation? This is going to happen. We are already seeing it today. I'm going to finish off with a little wee bit more from this amazing, amazing woman.
It took 5 years from 1938 until 1943. We had a full-blown dictatorship.
Actually, I want to finish this gun. I think this is, no, maybe I did finish the gun one.
Had we kept our guns, we would have fought a bloody battle to the last men and women to keep our freedom. But we had no guns. A classic example is, in Switzerland, it is law that everybody has to have a gun. And Hitler took every country in Europe except Switzerland. And Switzerland did not have a war for more than 600 years. Hitler never tackled Switzerland. So keep your guns. Keep your guns. Like I said, the only information what we had, what the government provided for us, the nationalized radio station and the censored newspaper, nobody could come in and nobody could get out. We had no information, none whatsoever. We did not know that we had concentration camps. We found that out after the Americans and the Allies liberated us, that we had concentration camps, and we were shocked. We were totally shocked. When the people fear the government, that's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, that's liberty.
There are no final words spoken.
We have to take our country back as we know it. And a good way is that we educate our friends, everybody. I have my speech on a DVD. I urge you to have house parties, play my DVD, invite your neighbors, your friends, and educate them on socialism. We are almost 80% there. We have to take our country back as we know it. Those of us who sailed past the Statue of Liberty, we came to a country of unbelievable freedom and opportunity. America is the greatest country in the world. Amen. If we can keep it.
She is so right. I want to share a couple more little things. This is from the Vatican News. You can read it at the top. I'll post all the links, like I always do. This is socialism. Goodbye, freedom of religion. Another thing that Hitler did. Churches in Canada concerned by proposed changes to their tax status. Churches in Canada expressed concern over two recommendations from the Standing Committee on Finance proposing the revocation of tax exemption status of pro-life and faith-based charities, which would have a significant impact on Canadian society. The new Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney officially took office on Friday, March 14th after his election last week, and as leader of the Liberal Party. The former banker who previously led the central banks of Canada and the United Kingdom succeeds Justin Trudeau, who announced his resignation in early January, blah, 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 blah. The new head of the Canadian government's first major challenge will be addressing the trade war, blah, 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 blah. Their proposed changes. Behind the threats of provocations, another issue of a completely different nature has been overshadowed in recent weeks. The Liberal government's plan to revoke the charitable status of Canadian religious organizations. The Standing Committee on Finance issued a report in December with 462 recommendations. Among them, 2 clauses directly address this issue. Clause 429 proposes to revoke the charitable status of anti-abortion organizations. Clause 430 extends this policy to all religious organizations. Clause 430 aims to prevent these organizations from obtaining charitable status and could have a massive impact on Canadian society. Churches are sounding the alarm. Yes, they are sounding the alarm, and they better be worried. Recommendation 429. This clause proposes that the government no longer grant charitable status to organizations that oppose abortion. Goodbye, charter. Oh, but let's hammer on Pierre Poilievre for wanting to have proper justice given to people who lose their lives because they've been murdered. I've discussed this on a previous episode, and they're making this out to be like, oh, he's going against the charter, and he's going to use the notwithstanding clause for democracy. But nobody's talking about the attack on churches. Recommendation 430. This clause suggests amending the Income Tax Act to provide a new definition of charity that would remove the current privilege afforded to organizations that promote religious teachings. Essentially, it would remove the advancement of religion as a recognized charitable purpose as currently redefined by the Canadian Revenue Agency. The House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance released Report 21, which included these recommendations as part of its pre-budget consultations. This is in the Liberal Party's budget. They're going to tax the churches. They're going to tax your main residents. They're going to tax the living shit out of you. They're going to make sure that there is no middle class. They're coming after everything because they are spending all of our money that we don't have, while they're going to start printing even more money. The alarm should be going off, and mainstream as they are crickets. The recommendations have been met with concern and criticism, particularly from religious organizations and advocacy groups. The future of these recommendations is uncertain as Parliament was prorogued in early 2025. Bills that haven't received royal assent before prorogation die and must be reintroduced in next session. If these guys if they get into power, and there is enough of the NDP, and I don't know about the Bloc, I don't know where they're going to go on this issue, but we know that the Bloc seem to vote pretty much 95% of whatever the Liberals want, especially if they aren't included, which is how this is what this Quebec bullshit federal party does. As long as we can make our own rules, we're not included in that. Yeah, vote for the rest of Canada. They don't want Canada to do well. They're a separatist party, raking in millions upon millions of dollars from the rest of Canada while shutting down the very resource that pays them that money. Our country is screwed. These bills were going to get passed. They are coming after your primary residents. So all you seniors out there that are getting ready, because now the house is starting to become a bit of a burden and you're ready to kind of move into a home, you go ahead and you vote Liberal and you're going to lose. They're going to capital gains tax the shit out of you. It is going to happen. I showed this on a previous episode. Pierre warned about this. They even put it out on a questionnaire, on a census. Why do they even need to know that? They only want to know because they need to know how much revenue they can collect. Socialism, people. Socialism. The alarm, the sirens should be screaming, but they're unplugged by the mainstream media. The most powerful part of a socialist government is the propaganda arm. This is going to happen if the Liberals come into power. Goodbye, freedom of religion. I'm a freedom person. Yeah, if you want to have an abortion, that is your choice. Should you have unlimited and paid for by the taxpayers? I'm sorry. No. That's the law we have right now. We have people that are literally going out, couples that are going out, finding out what the child is. If it's not the sex they want, we pay for it. I'm sorry. I don't believe in that. I believe in freedom, but I also believe the burden shouldn't be put on taxpayers. And who gets the heaviest burden of this tax put on us? Do you think the uber rich do? They don't care. Again, slowly decimating what's left of the middle class. It's the extremacy in which socialism does. The ideas of freedom are being used against us. They're warfare. Democracy, this liberal government is using the pretend ideas of fighting for democracy when it's not. Progressivism the whole progressive idea has completely gone so far left it's over the cliff on the other side. The media is hiding the entire Liberal Party. All they're focusing on is Carney. These whole talks, Christopher Freeland going on talk shows, well, we have a parliamentary system. We don't vote for the president. We vote for our individual. And then you get bullshit. That's all proven a lie. Look at the polls. Look what the Liberal Party has done in the last 10 years. Is the media bringing any of this up? Crickets. All crickets. Are any of those liberals out doing media appearances? Nada. Nobody wants to see them. They're sick of them. But Carney this, Carney that. Trump, Carney, Trump, Carney, Trump, Carney. Ready? Look at the ball. Ready? Look at the ball. There's Trump. Your alarms should be going off, people. I hated to have to do an episode like this. There's kind of a lot of stuff going on I would rather have talked about, and I know this is well over an hour long, but I urge you, like Kitty said, take the time and play this. Let your kids hear this. And then sit back and use these examples. And you don't even need mine. Every time she mentions something, type Liberal Party in front of it. And then whatever she says after it, and look it up. And you will find that the Liberal Party is literally lockstep with these ideas. It's buried. You'll get all of the propaganda first, CBC, CTV, Global, all the rest of them. You got to do a little bit of research. It's not hard to do right now. But if this government stays in power, you won't have the ability to search that deep. Your pages will be limited from 1 million down to 3 because that's how much control this government wants. That's the censorship that's coming through with the rest of these bills that are sitting on the floor, going to be revamped and re-brought forward. And if you think Carney is any different, you're being misled. He is the worst, the most evil part, who's guided Trudeau and his party on this green zealot religion, which all it is fascism. Socialist in the highest degree. I really do hope you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. I'm telling you, I have studied propaganda for generations. This is the main reason I started this whole show, was what I was seeing happen to my country. Our country is falling. I'm also going to attach that document about the dystopia future that I have on a previous episode that not enough people liked and shared. I was hoping that it would have exploded and got out there. I have a feeling that it might have been suppressed from YouTube because I'm one of those guys that talks about controversial things, and I watch my algorithms fall, and I watch how browsers boot me off. I can see all of it on different types of computer programs that show my algorithms. But you know what? I'm not afraid of that because this is why I did this channel, to get the truth out there. Once again, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm Alias Tagay. Please stay informed.